this edition, we've got some fantastic layouts to share with you, including some that have been in operation for decades. As for prototypes, we'll take you to some absolutely amazing railroad destinations and explore great equipment from the past and present. And of course, we all strive to add realism and detail to our layouts. So we'll share some secrets and techniques that will help you make your operation look more authentic. And when you see this graphic, pay attention because it tells you the name of a computer file stored on this DVD, including additional details and techniques for creating and improving your layout. Let's get rolling as we bring the action, power, and creativity of model railroading to life in the Dream, Plan, Build video series.
Well, we were working in the casinos in Atlantic City on a kind of a temporary basis and wanted to get back west, and we wanted to get into a business that we enjoyed what we were doing. So we thought a while and looked around a while, and I decided to build the Underground Railroad, which is something that we could share our expertise and enjoyment with the people. The railroad's 1,000 square foot in size, and it kind of winds all around, but it's all part of one benchwork plan. We have the state of California divided into sections with the correct railroads running in those sections. We have the Western Pacific and the Feather River Canyon, the Southern Pacific and the Sierras and the San Joaquin Valley and the Santa Fe and the San Joaquin Valley and Tehachapi Loop area and the Union Pacific and the Cajon Summit. So you can divide it into those areas if you like. We have no train that makes the entire route. We'll start up in the Feather River Canyon. That's Western Pacific country, and we've basically done a very large canyon area with the river flowing through it, a lot of pines, and the service facility of Ketty with its twin water towers. Going south, we have the city of Sacramento, complete with a state capitol, and we move over to Roseville, which is the main SP service yards with a large roundhouse and its hump yards. Then we move on up into the Sierras, and that's got a few interesting scenes up there. We've redone the stalled city of San Francisco streamliner that was snowbound in 1952. We've got a large ski area with an operating ski lift. We've got the Ness Lumber Company, which is a mythical lumber company complete with the Loch Ness Monster up there for log clearance. And we've got the town of Truckee with a large wood trestle, and that's basically where they exchanged the helper power over the summit. Moving south from there, we got the San Joaquin Valley with Stockton and its related farm industries, Fresno with a nice farm and some smaller farm industries. Moving down to Bakersfield, where oil is predominant down in that area, we did a large refinery. Moving right out of Bakersfield, we move into the Tehachapi Loop, and not a whole lot has to be said about that. Most people in trains know that. Then we move on up to the Cajon Summit, where high desert mining is probably the major industry, and we've got a couple of mine operations up there. The trains are running automatically. There's about 3 to 5 trains on every route, and they're spaced by a homemade block system designed by my repairman, Jim Coustier. And it basically, the trains with a magnet on them trip a reed switch, which then trips a relay board, spacing the trains, stopping them and starting them so that no 2 trains are allowed into one block at any one time. We use standard DC power. In some cases we use commercial packs. In other cases we've home-built packs to go up to about 5 amps. We've got about 18,000 hours of construction time into it, and I like the traditional methods, especially for strength, where it's very necessary for commercial display. So we used an open grid system with 2x4s on 2x6 cross members and half-inch sub-road bed with 1x4 risers. The space scenery base was done with hydrocal reinforced with aluminum screening. Then we put real dirt and real rock wherever we could find it, and supplemented them with about 1,000 hydrocal castings. So there's about 2,300 pounds of hydrocal on the entire railroad. The track we used initially was nickel-silver Code 100 embedded in a roadbed of wood, but we decided on flex track mounted on cork at a later date because it gave us much more flexibility. I might add that we wanted to build a layout with common products. First of all, time and money wouldn't permit us to do otherwise. but we wanted the average person to be able to identify with the railroad and see products that he might use or find on the shelves on the railroad and present them in a manner that he would like to have them done later. One major difference from the off-the-shelf products that I was mentioning is the engines that we have to run. We do have to modify everything with CAN motors for endurance running because the off-the-shelf products just won't hold up endurance-wise. Most of the rolling stock is straight out of the box. We do change the couplers, and we use a dummy knuckle coupler, but that's about it. One thing we wanted to achieve is a definite sense of intimacy with the railroad. That way we let people into the trains rather than on the perimeter of them. We also get people involved in running some small stuff. We have got about 16 buttons around the layout that people will run some small trains and do some mechanical animation. It's really fun for the kids and they love it. Having the correct routes, running in the correct areas along with their related industries, give people a geographical representation of what railroading has meant to California and probably will mean to California in the future. We try very hard to answer people's questions about trains in general, model railroading specifically, so we gear our whole operation to help and advice as well as just enjoyment.
Tortoise switch machines are probably the most popular brand of slow motion switch machines. They move the points of the turnout slowly from one side to the other, as opposed to twin coil switch machines, which used to be the most common, which snap the points over. Over a long time that can damage, throw things out of gauge, so most people prefer the slow motion machine. It also doesn't require a capacitor discharge system to fire it off. When you get the tortoise switch machine, it comes with some assembly required. This arm needs to be slipped in place. It can adjust up and down, which adjusts the tension of the arm as well as its throw to some extent. You also need to bend the throw arm. The throw arm that comes with the Circutron tortoise is .025, which is adequate for HO and if you have a relatively shallow roadbed, but many modelers opt to go heavier and go up to 030 or 035 steel wire. If you do that, the only thing you have to do is drill out the little hole here slightly to get your heavier wire through. But I'll go ahead and just use the 025. There's a template on the instructions for doing this, but it's fairly easy to eyeball. All we're really doing is putting a 90-degree bend here and then just a slight angle between there and here to straighten it up. So this goes through the center, slips into the little hole here. That wire is kept in place by this little keeper screw, screws in there. Tortoise recommends that you don't manually move this, though you can do so very gently if you must to get it centered, but otherwise they recommend doing it by powering. The outer taps supply the power for moving it from one side to the other. The other taps go off to power the points and frogs of the turnout, or can go off to a DCC system for relay information as well. The first step in installing a tortoise switch machine is to locate the hole for the throw pin. That's right directly beneath the throw bar on the turnout. So I'll mark that and then move my rail out of the way and drill the hole. And we'll just ease up a little bit as you come through the wood. And that should do it. You want to clean out the hole on both sides. It should be fairly smooth, especially going through MDF. And now we'll move below the bench work and install the tortoise from below. The next step in installing a tortoise machine is to mark the location for the screws that will hold it to the roadbed underneath. I'm going to screw mine in, which is how they were designed, but it should be noted that other modelers have taken shortcuts. Some put Velcro on the bottom, just self-stick Velcro. Others have been known to use hot glue as quick and easy ways of just sticking it in place. I still tend to find using actual screws a little more comforting. I don't quite trust the other methods, but I can certainly understand wanting to make it easier. Next, we'll start a couple of screws in the holes before actually putting the machine up in place. Okay. Okay, we'll now install the switch machine. We have to put this throw rod through the throw bar of the turnout. This is where having a friend up above to help guide this into the throw bar is really helpful. Once we get it caught, we can slide it up into our screws and tighten these screws down. Screws in on that side, I can put them in on this side. They do not have to be up real snug and tight. You don't want to crush the plastic. And that's the installation. Now we can just attach our wires onto these leads and run it to either our switch control panel or to a DCC decoder. And that's the basic installation of a tortoise switch machine.
I think I was about 6 years old when my dad put a layout under the Christmas tree, and I fell in love with it right away. A few years later, he took me down to the B&O yard in our hometown, and I'd watch him switching the coal loads around, and I decided right then that railroads were the thing for me.
Why did you choose the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad for your prototype?
Well, I like the type of operation that the B&O Railroad has, and it was my hometown railroad. But many years ago, an old fellow who had worked for the B&O took me for a ride over the West End where the B&O crosses the Allegheny Mountains. And when I saw that scenery, I said, I've got to have a model railroad of this place. And that's what we built.
Describe your unusual railroad design.
Well, this model railroad is a little bit different than most model railroads that you see because it's built as an island. It does not touch the wall at any place. And you walk around the outside of the layout, and the mountains act as view blocks so you can't see the whole railroad at one time. And when you isolate the places in the railroad, it seems natural that the train appears and goes through the town and disappears, and you'll pick it up somewhere else. And that, I think, is probably the most unusual feature of our design.
On a tour of your model railroad, what would we see?
The first thing you would see when you were coming in from the west would be the M&K yard, where the M&K branch takes off along Cheat River. At this location, the coal is classified, put into trains for shipment to the east, and the empties are brought in from the east to be distributed back to the west. There's also a helper station there for servicing the locomotives that help the coal trains over the mountain. As you move on to the east, you would pass through the village of Bond, where we run into the three-track main and the first junction for shuttling trains back and forth across the mountains. We would move on and come to HA, which is the largest junction on the railroad. It's still a rod plant over there. They haven't had a chance to put in the new electric switch machines. We would also pass the Independence coal mine and the Logan loader, and then we would disappear to the east to Kaiser.
How did you plan this model railroad?
We started by making trips down to West Virginia over the West End. We traveled the railroad from Kaiser to Grafton, which is the area that we're modeling. We looked at the track arrangements, we looked at the industries, we looked at the railroad itself, we looked at the terrain, and we came back and we laid out a railroad that we felt we could fit those features into, and we tried to create a little bit of West Virginia here in the basement.
Tell me about the scratch-built structures.
Well, I like to scratch build structures because you can build structures that are typical for the B&O Railroad. And we've built several of the towers and stations that we've seen along the B&O. We've also built structures that are suited to the terrain that we have here. For example, the trestles, the arch bridges, the trusses that we have. We have also built several line-side industry buildings that were typical for the area. For example, we've built from actual coal mines that at one time existed, and we put those on the layout.
Tell us about the trees.
The first thing that everybody says when they come down here in the cellar is, look at all those trees. We made the trees, the idea was to get eastern scenery, and most of those West Virginia mountains are covered with trees. We started with lichen, and we put glue on the lichen, and we put ground foam on top of the lichen. Then the lichen ran out, and we got into polyfiber, and we started using spray adhesive and ground foam on polyfiber, and then we glue them directly onto the plaster layout. And that's how we make our trees.
Why is model railroading such a complete hobby?
Well, model railroading is a creative endeavor. You're always creating something, and because of that, it maintains your interest in the hobby. If you stay in it for any length of time at all, you're bound to meet some people who are interested in the same thing you are, and you'll get some fine friendships through the hobby. Some of them will span a very long distance. We've had people come in here from out of the country. It's very gratifying to have that kind of recognition for your work. It's a great hobby to be in, and you'll never get tired of it.
Okay, when it comes to building large structures for your layout, the problem is always trying to make use of space that we don't have on a layout. So we wind up using a lot of narrow or flat structures that have a three-dimensional front on them. And there's several ways of building this. We're going to look at two of them today. The first one is a modular system. It's made, similar systems are available from Design Preservation Models, and Walther's Cornerstone series also has some. And the way the modular things work, they have a series of little packets of the parts that you can buy. There's four, in this case, there's 4 walls in each package. And to help you plan what combination of parts you need, each company offers a planning kit. Walther's has theirs on the internet, and Design Preservation Models has a set of templates that they sell as a packet all by itself. And what these templates do is they have little drawings on them that show the exact size of all the different pieces. And the way you use them is you take the parts you need and you photocopy it several times, cut them out with a pair of scissors, and then tape them together. So we have a full wall representing a 7-story building. The trick now is how many of these pieces do we need to fill the space we're going to build. So you make a cardboard template or a cardboard mock-up of the floor footprint of the building, as well as the height and width of the thing, so we know what'll fit on the layout. It's much easier to cut the cardboard to fit a space than it is to try and trim a finished plastic building down if it's too big in any direction. So then we take the photocopied sheet and make extra copies of it, tape them together until we have enough assembled to do the whole wall. Then we take that and we tape it to the cardboard mock-up, and we can see exactly how it's going to look when it winds up on the layout later. In this case, we're only going to finish one end and one side because that's all that's going to be seen on the layout. All the work of trying to finish the side and the back isn't worth it because it's going to be against a backdrop where nobody will see it. Once we have the mock-up put together with the photocopies on it, we order the necessary packages of parts, which we can get any combination that we want of. In this case, we get 4 walls in a package, along with the windows and the trim pieces. And each one of these will make up one small part of the finished building. Now the trick comes in trying to put all these wall sections together so that they will fit into a solid, complete wall. To assemble the wall panels, we put the first one tight in the corner of the framing square, and then we use plastic cement, run it down the edge of the styrene, and press the pilaster in position. And you hold it in there tight on the other piece for about 30 seconds or so, and that gives the glue enough time to set up. Then we can take the next one, next wall panel, you apply glue to the tab on this one and put it in under the pilaster, and then just hold the whole thing together for about a half a minute or so, and then you'll have this whole assembly in one piece. Now we just keep repeating that procedure all the way along the wall. And eventually we wind up with a wall section like this that's got just the joints on the back, and all the pilasters are in position all the way down the wall. And once the glue hardens, then you can handle this in order to stack it into the finished full wall. And then all we do is we line up all these different wall sections, put them together, and add glue to the joint, put them together and hold it. And then once they set up, we can turn the whole assembly over and add heavy styrene as bracing between the sections. So we can turn them over this way. You'll have the next one here, and then we can add styrene bracing here, or we can go up and down along the edges. But the heavy styrene is the key to giving the building the strength, because we use long pieces as long as we can get to cover as much of the wall in one piece as we can. Now, to do the final assembly of the main parts of the building, we have the 2 finished walls, and they are going to have a 90-degree corner here. So I put them together according to the modular system's instructions, and I put a piece of 1/4-inch square stock in the back behind the joint to reinforce it. That gives us a nice square corner there. This end has an angle to it because of the way it has to fit against the backdrop. So to take care of that, I used 2 pieces of the 1/4-inch square stock and put them together, and then just bevel this edge so that it'll hold the piece of styrene that I cut to make the end out of. The end wall is just a piece of flat styrene. There's no detail on it because it's going to be against the backdrop. Same thing goes, the back wall is just a sheet of styrene that lays on here, and I mount it with some small screws. Once all the wall sections have been put together and reinforced, I add more reinforcing so that all the corners have a piece of the square stock in them, in the middle of the building and on each floor level, wherever there's a joint between the wall sections. Then when I make these floors, Those are cut just using the end of the building as a pattern. The middle one is positioned a little bit higher than normally. Usually I put that either in the bottom or the first floor here, but because we've got a track coming into this building, I moved it up a little bit so it's in the middle of the building. And that gives everything a great deal of strength through the whole structure. Now, to finish things off, at this point the whole building is raw plastic. So I take and I spray paint the whole building with a brick red. And what that does is it covers up any glue joints that may appear along any of these seams. And while the paint is drying, then I go take the window frames and add the glazing to each one of those. In a building this size, there's about 60 of them. So by the time I had the glazing on the back of all the windows, this was dry enough that I could handle it, put it down flat, and then install the windows. And each window goes in and put a brush load of cement around it and hold it for a few seconds, and that'll hold it in place. After all the windows are in, then I come back and I use grimy black spray paint and spray paint the inside of the building grimy black, because then you can't see through the windows to tell that the building is empty. And at the same time, anybody on the outside of the building will still see reflections on the shiny side of the glass. The second way of doing three-dimensional backdrop buildings doesn't take near as much fitting as the modular method because we're using much larger pieces, in this case whole wall sections. And what we're doing for this is I'm using what would normally be a kit for a large rectangular building. Only instead of putting it together as a rectangle, I'm opening the thing out. We use one of the long walls as the middle of the structure, put an end wall on the end, line things up, and in this case, the way it's made, it's going to go together very nicely to give us a nice long, thin building. As you plan this type of a structure, be sure to look through the small parts in the kit. This one has a bunch of extra little filler blocks that you can use to close up openings you don't need. And it includes some for doorways, some for windows, so you can make any combination of things that you might need for your layout. You convert one of them into a loading dock. We can do the glue joints here, flip it over and add the styrene for the reinforcing, and when you're all done, all you need to do then is paint this in the brick color, add your trim, and when you're all done, you wind up with a narrow structure like this. It's only 1.5 inches deep, but it's got all the things that give it the appearance of a working building. In this case, I also added a couple of loading docks that are spaced for boxcars to come in and drop loads, as this was supposed to be a printing company on my layout. So we can bring in boxcar loads of paper, and it doesn't take much room, but it still looks like a big, impressive industry. One that would use several boxcar loads of paper a day. And the back side of it simply shows how it's put together. This was the original front wall of the building. This was one end wall, this was the other end wall, and these two panels were the corner pieces on the original building. And then there's two end walls that give it a little bit of depth. One is plain, the other has some windows in it, and those were from the original kit's back corners of the building. So by just looking at the parts and rearranging things a little bit, you can wind up producing a very nice looking big building that doesn't take much space at all. These modular structures offer an amazing range of styles and construction methods that you can simulate to fit your own layout. And our modular building fits perfectly thanks to building a mock-up ahead of time. There's plenty of room for the trains to get by it. And we have the first building in our own concrete canyon finished.
This blustery East Texas landscape is the perfect setting for a ride on a steam locomotive tucked warm and dry inside a world of nostalgia and history. Hop aboard and experience a bit of Texas history. Ride 25 miles between Rusk and Palestine. While aboard, think about the fact that this historic ride is built on a line built by prisoners way back in the 1800s.
It was started in 1894 by the Texas prison system. They had an iron smelter in the prison in Rusk, and they built 5 miles out from the prison to get iron ore and wood to make the charcoal for their process. And then a few years later, it was extended another 5 miles to Maydale. Later on, it was extended to Palestine, but that was about 1909.
Prisoners are a part of recent history, too. In 1996 and 97, prison crews were put to work clearing brush from the tracks and restoring passenger coaches. But this railroad isn't for iron anymore. It's just for the fun of it.
Well, it winds through the East Texas piney woods. It's hilly and beautiful. We'd cross so many creeks. We've got almost a mile of trestles. We've got 24 bridges, and the longest one's a little over 1,100 feet. And it's a beautiful ride.
The operation is run by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. They have steam locomotives that pull some impressive coaches.
Well, we have 4 operating locomotives. Number 201 is the oldest, built in 1901 for the Texas and Pacific. Got the 300, was an Army engine, built in 1917 for the Army, and it was later, after World War II, it was sold to the Tremont and Gulf Railroad, who also had this engine 400 built in 1917, and they ran on the same railroad before they came here. Then number 500 was built in 1911. It was a passenger engine for the Santa Fe. It's our largest locomotive that we run. And we have this engine behind me, the 610, which was built in 1927 for the Texas and Pacific. And of course, it's the largest and heaviest, but we don't operate it. But it's in pretty good shape.
Located just 150 miles from Houston and 120 miles from Dallas, it's a great getaway for rail fans in the area. These are the kind of classic trains that make you nostalgic for the golden age of train travel. In fact, if you just sit back, relax, and use your imagination, it's all here. It's the sort of thing that captures your attention and your sense of wonder. Talk to people like Natasha Bettis, a mechanical engineer by trade. She volunteers to keep it all rolling. You quickly find out that it's not just the passengers who are captivated.
There's something magical about steam. You take some fuel and some water, and under the right conditions, you get massive amounts of power. And it's amazing to me that 100 years ago they designed something like this with a piece of paper, a slide rule, and a pencil, and this right up here. And doing the work that I do as an engineer, I see that, you know, all the stuff that we do as technical people, we do with computers. And to me, you know, 100 years ago, this was rocket science. And it's amazing that a century later, they're still running and running well. I don't know that things that we would build today would still be operational 100 years from now.
It should be a comfort to know that no matter where you are, steam from a locomotive still fills the East Texas skies, and the lonesome whistle always calls you back to the past.
The train barn was started in 1973 in an old cow barn that my granddad had cattle in. The building is about 70 years old, and it's been in the family for over 100 years. In the upstairs of the barn, we have a model railroad. It's all Lionel. It's a 2,500 square foot layout with approximately 2,000 feet of track, 85 switches, and the main line is approximately 1,000 feet. It's all Gargraves track, and the total difference in height is about 44 inches from high to low. On our model railroad, we have mountain scenes, gorges, yards. We have 2 yards. One of them will hold probably 75 cars, and the other one will hold approximately 50 cars. We have a large engine facilities with 2 roundhouses and a diesel shed, large coaling tower. We also have an amusement park at one end of our layout in one of our cities. It's got a roller coaster and a N-gauge train that is used for an amusement train. We have a city at the other end which has a model of the Vicksburg Railroad Station in Vicksburg, Michigan. We also have several bridges, some worn truss bridges, large trestles, model of the Canyon Diablo Bridge, and we also have a model of our farm, which we live in. We feel the most spectacular scene is the model of the Royal Gorge and the Royal Gorge Bridge. The bridge was built in about 300 hours using brass angle, bolted and soldered together, plastruct base with about 50 pounds of steel in it for weight so it doesn't raise up at one end when an engine goes across the other end. Neoprene tubing for the cables, but there's a chain in the neoprene tubing so it won't stretch out of shape. Also, we have fish line that holds the bridge to the cables. We have on our layout approximately 35 locomotives, over 300 cars. Most of them are the MPC cars, which were made after 1970. We feel they roll a lot better than the older cars. And one train we pulled had 57 cars in it, pulled by one engine. I like operating Lionel trains because they're larger. You can feel as though you're part of the layout. And in constructing buildings and bridges like that, the bridges are larger and you can put more detail in them. And with the big fingers, you can get them in there a lot easier to do the work on the bridges and buildings and so on. We started construction on the layout using 2x4s, 2x6s, 3/4 inch plywood. We used wood fiber plaster on 1/8 inch hardware cloth with very little support under it, and then after the plaster dries, you can take all the supports out. For trees, we used weeds that we got out of the field and just sprayed them with green paint. The painting was done by my wife. She used latex paint on almost everything. There's a little oil-based paint on the walls, but she did all the painting and then took art lessons after she had the painting done. The structures on the model railroad are some Plasticville, some Lionel buildings, and most of the rest are all scratch built out of balsa wood or plywood One engine house in particular has stones on all the walls embedded in caulking compound. The ideas for the structures either came from model railroader or craftsman or my own ideas. For one instance is a model of our farm that we have in the one little area there. The others are just mostly buildings out of my own idea for the areas. We can run 2 trains on the layout at the present time on the same track. When we get all the wiring done, we'll be able to run 5 or 6 trains at a time with 2 engines operating in the yard and several on the main lines. Right now we just put a new control panel in, and we've got to do all the rewiring on switches and so on like that. The advice I'd give to anyone starting in Lionel, HO, or N gauge would be not to start too large. Start with a small layout and add on. On our layout, we started with one area and added on 5 years later, and then added on another 5 years. If you try to start too big, you'll become a slave to your layout, and you'll burn yourself out before you even get a train running. So just take your time on it and don't start large. Future of the plans of the train barn, I would like to put an addition on a building, but I have 2 obstacles, the city and my wife. I can get around the city, but I don't think I can get around my wife. But right now, what we plan on doing is to put more buildings in and finish it off with more detail work and so on like that. And one thing I'd like to say is, remember, as long as you like it, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. That's all that matters.
For this segment, we're going to be talking about building a deck girder bridge. Now, I'm not going to take you through all of the steps of building a deck girder bridge because we're going to use a kit, a micro-engineering kit. It's extremely well engineered, and the instructions are all in the box. Don't be intimidated. There's a lot of parts in there. There's a lot of steps to follow, but it's well thought out. Everything fits. Just figure out what the parts are and put it together. The point of this demonstration is to discuss how we might make sure that that bridge is going to stay in alignment even when it's going to get some pretty tough service. For example, this box that you see here in front of me is a lift-out section of the layout that goes right in front of the main entrance door into the basement. It's about 4 feet long. And if this were simply plastic bridge parts glued together, I'm not entirely sure that it would stay together over a period of time. Now, what I did for the bridge that I wanted to model, you can often find photographs and other things like that. But in this case, I found an actual drawing of the bridge. And in one corner of that drawing was a small rendering of the entire bridge, span to span, all the way across. And I had it blown up to HO scale at a local print shop. And when I then took that and used it as a template, I could figure out just how that bridge was going to fit in that area and size the box accordingly and contour the land accordingly. Now, by land, I mean the plywood that supports it. So this is the bridge we're going to build. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see that there are towers. Now, Microengineering, the company that makes these kits, you can see those towers that I'm talking about right here. And you can buy this tall steel viaduct kit. It's got an HO scale or an HON3 with slightly different bridge sizing. The pieces are in this box that we need to build this, but they're not necessarily going to fit exactly. One of the things to be aware of when you're building a model is that these towers are 3 different levels, 1, 2, and 3. And it's a lot easier to build a bridge if you're exactly 1 panel high or exactly 2 panels high or all 3 panels high. If you come out 2.5 panels high, you're going to have a little kit bashing to do. And we'll talk about that a little later on. So this box probably contains everything we need to build this bridge, but I can almost guarantee you that there's going to be some cutting and fitting to make it all work. In addition to the kit that's the entire bridge kit, they also sell just the towers. You can buy these separately so that if you need an extra one or you don't need all that's in the kit, you can just buy the tower. And in addition to that, you can buy several different varieties of the deck girder bridge kit that goes underneath the rails. They make them in, this one for example is 50 feet long for HO scale. And it's the right thickness to approximate this bridge. It's a little thicker than the prototype drawings show, but that's probably a good idea because a lot of these drawings are dating back to the days when they're running 280 consolidations and light multi-power like that. And as later Mikados came, 282s, and then on this part of the nickel plate Berkshires, 284s, often these bridges were strengthened. So the bridge, just because it comes in the box doesn't mean that that's just exactly what you want to use. Now, the catch is that when you consider this part here is 50 feet long, and you measure each span of the bridge, it's only 30 feet long. What are you going to do about that? Well, as it turns out, they do make a bridge kit that has 30-foot spans, but the spans are very thin. Usually a deck girder bridge, or even a through girder bridge, it's about a 1:7, maybe 1:10 ratio of height to length. And so therefore, if the bridge is only 30 feet long, the height can be less. But there still has to be a certain amount of strength there for a heavy steam locomotive. And in this case, the nickel plate made each one of these spans 30 feet long, even the ones between the towers, which is very typical. Sometimes the towers are 30 feet wide, the spans are 50 feet, 70 feet wide. In this case, they're all the same, and they're all 30 feet, but the thickness is quite a bit more than what you get with the tower kit with that 30-foot. So what I've done is I've taken the 50-foot bridge and I've shortened it. And it's no big deal to shorten these kits. All you have to do is take the bridge sides and measure how long they are. They're 50 feet long. You want to get rid of 20 feet. You don't want to whack off one end, because if you look carefully at these, you'll notice that there's extra bracing towards the end of the bridge, so you want to take a piece out of the middle. And that's what I did. So I've got 17 feet at one end and 13 feet at another end, and that's going to add up to 30 feet. When you do that, the bracing underneath gets a little bit strange, but generally you can make it all work out. Now, most deck girder bridge kits are like this model that Frank Hodina put together. You can see here very clearly that there's X bracing that holds the sides in tram. In other words, they're not going to get to skew in any way. So you've got this Z bracing across the top, you've got the identical Z bracing across the bottom, and you've got the X bracing that holds everything apart at the right distance and stiffens it in both directions. Now, this is the way you would build well, this is probably about a 70-foot girder bridge. And you could build a series of these, and you could connect them together, and you could put shorter sections on towers, and you'd be done. What I want to do, though, is have some method over this long distance of ensuring that everything lines up just perfectly. And there's a fellow named Jim Gaines down in the Cincinnati area that came up with a pretty novel idea. He went to the local home improvement store, and he found a piece of aluminum channel, and it's exactly 3/4 of an inch wide on the end to fit over the end of a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. And I guess you'd use it, for example, to dress up the ends of shelving or something if you wanted to do that with aluminum. And it turns out that this is almost the right width to fit one of these girders around. If you don't have all the X bracing in the middle and you don't have the cross bracing along the top, you can slip this thing inside of one of these and it just fits over it. It's a little snug, so I trim off a little bit of the interior and I space the two girders a little bit further apart by putting little shims on the Z bracing underneath, but it just barely fits underneath there. So now suddenly we've got something that looks to me like we have a solution, and we can make sure that if we use this as the core of the bridge, A, it's not going to be seen. It'll be hidden by ties on the top, and it'll be hidden on the sides and bottom by the bridge. And B, it's going to be just absolutely straight as an arrow. So I took another piece of this channel, and cut it to the exact length of the bridge that I need. And I cut notches in the end of the bridge, supports, so that this will just drop right in. And this then gives me the bridge that I need. It's solidly in place, and all I have to do is lay track on top of the bridge. How do we do that? We have several choices. In the kit that Microengineering supplies, they actually put in bridge track, sections like this. Now, bridge track is a little different than normal track. These ties, instead of being a typical 8'6" tie, are very often more like 10 feet long. And that is because they have to support, on the outside they put a bridge timber to keep everything in alignment. And so these ties are not only closer together, as you can see, but they're actually longer. Now, what's missing from this is guardrails, but you could go back and add those in between, just like you see on any bridge. In case a car derails, it tries to keep the wheels locked in there and keep it from derailing. But we could just put these one after another across the bridge. You'd have a little bit of a problem where you need to join them together with rail joiners. You'd have to remove ties, solder it, put a rail joiner in there, and probably solder would be a good idea, and then fit ties underneath it. That's one way we could do it. The second way that we could do it is Walters sells bridge track. It comes in a nice big box like this, and it's the only catch with it is that it's code 83. Now that means that the rail is 83 thousandths high, and that's a little thicker rail than the nickel plate would have used back in that time. They'd use something closer to what we call code 70 rail, 70 thousandths. But if you look at this piece of bridge track, you can see that it not only has the running rails on it, but it also has the guardrails that are already built right into it. And they sell, in addition to that, they sell pieces that you can put right on the end that terminate the guardrails as they come back together. And they made sure not to let them touch, and thereby potentially creating a short circuit. So all the pieces are right there from Walters. They get those timbers on the outside. You could just glue this down and get as many links as you need, cut them to fit, tie them together, and you're done. If I needed code 83 rail, I would have been all set. I wanted code 70 rail. So there was a third option, and that's the one I used here, and that is Central Valley makes a tie strip as well. And they had the bridge timber on one side, and the other side you can add it. You could also cut these apart so that you could curve it. What would you do if you wanted to curve this bridge? Now that we're talking about curves, what you could do is in this aluminum channel is every 30 feet or 50 feet or 70 feet is you could cut a little notch in it and then kink it. Bridges are not a smooth curve. The rails are, but not the bridge. The bridges are chords, they're angles. So you could notch this, and I've seen this on Jim Gaines' railroad. You could see where he had notched this, and so it comes out and just bends neatly around. You'd have to do some careful measuring, but you could actually do that. Then the ties would flow. They would come around very smoothly, and you can do that with the Central Valley tie strip. Now, how do you fasten the rail to the Central Valley tie strip? It's pretty hard to see, but they have molded into the tie strip vertical little pegs that stick straight up. And those pegs, as you put a piece of rail in there, you can bend them over. It's just styrene, but you can bend them over with a screwdriver. And you bend them right over the base of the rail. And that's what I've done here. I've bent them over, and it fastens the rail very securely. Then the guardrail, you would just use cyanoacrylate or something to attach. Since we have eliminated all of the cross bracing in the bridge and the Z bracing along the bottom or along the top of the bridge, we're left just with this channel. And it's a C-shaped channel. Only the cross bracing at the bottom, the Z bracing along the bottom, is still part of the bridge. Now, what that lets us do is if we take this piece of aluminum channel and we slide this over the end, you can see here that it fits pretty neatly around the end of the bridge. So if we glue this to either the aluminum channel, the plastic bridge sides, or what I'm going to do, glue it to the bottom of the ties, Then we have a bridge that is self-supporting. The aluminum channel's doing all the work. The towers and piers that support it from underneath are just cosmetic. And that means they don't have to be so perfectly aligned and shimmed. We can just add them as an afterthought. In fact, that's not even really part of the demonstration today, is all the supporting detail is just absolutely an afterthought. Now let's take some cyanoacrylate. This is the gap filling variety. There's several good brands. And we'll put a light coat of CA along the top of each one of these spans. Just draw a light bead along there, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to make sure that the top of the bridge is in good shape. Now, what I'm going to do is start at one end of the bridge, and I'm going to slide without gluing my fingers to this. I'm going to slide this up underneath the bridge ties until it touches the bottom of the bridge ties, and then I'll hold it in place. And the cyanoacrylate will tie the girders that I've just slid up there to the bottom of the bridge ties, and we'll be in business. The only hard part of this whole process is not becoming part of the bridge yourself by gluing yourself to the bridge in the process of gluing the bridge to the bottom of the ties. I've just butted these two together. On this second one, there's going to be a tower that I'll build at some future point. But for right now, I want to get the bridge running, get the railroad running. I don't have to worry about all those extra details at this point. Now remember, as you're looking at this, that I've cut every single one of these spans down from 50 feet down to 30 feet. If I had used the 30-foot spans that were in the kit, they would not have enough height to cover this 3/4 inch aluminum channel, so it wouldn't have worked. Now you could have built the kit the way the instructions say, when all else fails, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted a thicker bridge, and that gave me enough mass that I could get around this piece of aluminum channel. You can see in just not very long at all, we're almost done with a very large bridge project without any real concerns about alignment or anything else. If you find that one of your bridge sections isn't attaching itself as quickly and as securely as you'd like, you might get a hold of a clamp. These are sold by a number of producers, and you could just clamp on something and lock it on and go about your business while that's holding it in place. Here's the last girder. It's a 20-footer. If you look at the drawing, you can see that right at the end there's a short girder. This is the ground profile, so it's just that last little bit. Now you would think an engineer would be able to make this come out even with just 30-footers all the way across, but that's not the way they think in bridges. They know that a tower is typically 30 feet. They like to put 30 feet between towers, so it's multiples of 30 feet. If you have a big span, like over a river or something like that, you might put a 70-footer, even maybe a 100-footer, but by the time you get up to those lengths, you're probably talking about a truss bridge, the one with all the cross pieces, rather than a girder, which is just a thick I-beam. So when they got to the end of this bridge and discovered they had a little ways to go yet, they were quite happy to drop in a 10-foot I-beam or a 20-foot girder, and that's what we did here. And I made this one by simply taking a piece of the 50-footer and putting a couple of styrene stiffeners in and a new styrene end piece that you can see still in white, and made a quick and dirty 20-footer out of it. Now, the next thing we'll do, once all this is dried, is we'll just give it a coat of flat black spray paint right out of a can, and that'll give it a nice weathered looking finish. Won't be shiny black, I'll spray the ties and everything with that color because bridge ties tended to be very well creosoted. They didn't want to have to replace these anytime soon. So they didn't hesitate to take good care of bridge ties. And the black spray paint is going to give a good effect to that. Okay, without a whole lot of effort, we managed to get a bridge built. You can see, even at this length, it's pretty rigid. That's not going anywhere. I can run trains across this the way it stands. Now what we'll do, looking ahead, is I'll create a series of piers, towers. This is one that's I used as just a template. It's been broken in the middle and none of the sway bracing's in here. But you could see that we could fit this underneath here, line it up with one of the 30-foot spans right there, and we're pretty much in business. The way you'd normally build a bridge would be to have the deck built, flip it upside down, build the towers, glue the towers to it. When everything's secure, you know it's in alignment because it's built on a flat surface upside down. You'd flip it over, put it in place, and start shimming it up. This allows you to get the bridge in place first. By having the aluminum channel running throughout the bridge, it's not going to go anywhere, even if you bang it a little bit. You know, this is going to be pretty resilient, and since this is a lift-out piece of the railroad, not going to be much heavier with the aluminum channel, but it's certainly going to be a lot more rigid. And I'm not going to worry about the ends getting out of alignment to side. I'm not going to worry about them getting out of alignment this way. I'm not going to worry about anything in the middle. This piece of aluminum is going to hold everything right in place. So I'm going to be able to come back with these custom-built bents and towers and just fit them in place and then shim up from the bottom. I can sight down to make sure I don't have a little bit of a swale or anything, or even a little bit of a hump in it. But it's strictly cosmetic, should be a much easier bridge project to tackle. I did want to show you one other quick trick. I sprayed it with a quick coat of flat black out of a spray can, and even though this bridge was kept in pretty good repair by the nickel plate, some signs of rust and weathering usually make things look a little bit more lived in on a model railroad. So what I want to do now is just use a commercial product. There's a couple of them. This one by AIM Products is called Real Rust. I'm sure there's many other brands. Here's a small bottle of Rustall. You can find both of these in hobby shops anywhere. What I'm going to do is just show you how quickly this is. Sometimes things are as simple as they can absolutely be, and that's the way it is with this Rustall product or any of the things. You just brush it on the bottom of the bridge and let gravity do its work. And if you want more rust, you can come back. But you can see I'm not taking any pains whatsoever to do anything other than just brush some rust on. And I just want to show that over a period of time, the painters don't come out here every year and paint this thing, that some rust would accumulate on the lower surfaces, the bottom flanges, the stiffeners on each girder. So I'll just brush this on here and we'll walk away from it for a little while. And when we come back, my guess is that there'll be just a patina of rust along there. Now, we could do that on the top deck as well. This is wood. This isn't something that rusts, but there are bolts that hold these pieces of wood in place, and they're going to rust, and that rust is going to get on the wood. So we'll come back to this in a few minutes. While we're waiting for the rust to dry that we applied to the sides of the girder bridges, I wanted to just lead you a little bit further along the process that I'm going to use to finish building the bridge. Now, as I showed you before, this is one of the standard microengineering tower kits. This is the kit that microengineering sells just for the tower. You can buy a complete bridge kit with all the girders and everything else in it, and I think there's 2 or 3 towers in it. Or you can buy separate towers like this. Doesn't matter, it's the same parts. You can see from this photograph that you can use these individually like a bent and a trestle, or you can assemble the two into one big tower with all the cross pieces. And you can see that it has 3 stories. And that allows you to build a rather tall bridge. In fact, it is this tall, so you can see that it's taller than we need, at least on this bridge. In fact, if you look at the prototype drawing that I've laid here in front of the bridge, you can see that there's no more than 2 stories on any one of the bridges. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to cut this down to fit. Now, you don't want to cut the first story off because that's where it gets narrow enough to fit underneath the girder bridge. You don't want it sticking out too far, unless, of course, maybe you wanted a double-deck bridge, in which case you'd want it wider. A double-track bridge is what I meant to say. So we're going to need to do some cutting. Well, you would cut off the bottom story and discard it. We don't need it. That's still easier than building the kit the normal way because you got one whole story you don't have to build. So far, so good. But if we do that, and I put this underneath the bridge, you can see right on top of the drawing, and put it underneath the line that shows the bottom of the girders, you can see that even that second story sticks down farther than the prototype. More to the point, I've drawn a pencil line along below that shows the actual thickness of the girder that I'm using. The girders I'm using are a little thicker than the ones that were drawn in this particular nickel plate drawing. So I've got several things I've got to do, and what I did was I built both of the tower sides for this already to show you how the process works. The first story tower is shortened. I cut it off just a little bit. The second story is the same. So the second story was built just the way it is in the kit. The first story I shortened, which makes it a little wider than I wanted, but that's not a huge issue because the girders are a little bit wider, because I mentioned earlier that I spaced them out to fit around that 3/4 inch piece of aluminum channel. So they've come out just a little bit with shims, and that makes the extra width here not particularly a problem. Even if it were a problem, this bridge is only going to be viewed from this side. Where I'm standing is actually a sky backdrop, so I could slide the actual pier or tower back so that you didn't notice the fact that the back of it stuck out a little bit. So there's various ways to take care of problems like this. Once I had shortened that, that meant the diagonals that come in the kit are not exactly the right length. In fact, they're very long and very narrow angle on the kit going across here. You can trim either end of those diagonals to fit the new distance, and everything will come out all right. The rust is beginning to dry on here now, and if you look very carefully, you can see that there's little bits of vertical streaking of rust along each rib, which is exactly where you'd expect the rust to gather because there's rivets there. Anything that slows down the water is going to cause some deposits to be left behind. So right along the bottom flange and along these vertical flanges, there's just a little bit of patina of rust. Now, if you want a really rusty bridge, something that's been around quite a while, you might want to start out with something other than a flat black underneath. You might want to gray it up a little bit, or you may want to go back and just keep adding coats of one of these rusting fluids. You can do that. And then last, don't forget that both Bar Mills and Bragdon Enterprises have weathering chalks, and they have a little bit of tooth in them, and you could brush those on as well and then kind of smear them around to create a random pattern. I don't want much rust. The nickel plate took pretty good care of its bridges because there were big steam engines running over these things and pounding away at them, so they didn't fool around with that. So this is just about as much rust as I want. Went on in a few seconds and it wasn't a problem at all.
We had a bank in our backyard that was essentially non-usable piece of property, had a lot of ice plant growing on it. It was a typical Southern California looking backyard. And what we wanted to do was be able to utilize that space a little bit more appropriately and have something outside that would be part of our family when we barbecue and do things like that.
When Larry and Pam Webb built the Little Vista Railroad, they solved a landscaping problem and created the first outdoor railroad of its kind in the San Diego area. The Little Vista shows the creativity of the entire Webb family. Scratch-built buildings and live landscaping add to the charm.
Well, the large scale that I chose was G scale, and the reason that I chose such a large scale is for a couple reasons. One is that it's very, very sturdy outdoors. The other reason is that back when my children were younger, there was a need for them to have a bigger type of train to hold on to, and so even when they were 4, 5 years old, they were able to pick up a train car or pick up an engine and actually physically be able to set it down the track.
I have done a firehouse. It's called Beaumont Fire Co. And I did that when I was in 3rd grade. Beaumont stands for my first school that I went to.
We were studying about missions and we had to do a report. And so I picked San Diego de Alcala, and then my dad helped me make a styrofoam building, and then we put stucco over it and hung bells up, and it turned out to be a nice looking mission.
The one thing I really like about our garden railroad is that we've been able to utilize it for educational purposes, especially for our children's school. For example, just a few days ago, we hosted, opened up for a field trip for a 4th grade class who happens to be studying California history and railroading. So we had 30 children come over, and Larry gave a talk, we gave a test on railroading, and everyone just had a really good time.
A garden railroad means just what the name implies. The Webbs have cultivated a garden throughout their layout.
We have a lot of miniature Alberta spruces. They do very well here. We have a gray Santolina, which is up on the hill. It's a herb. We have a lot of evergreens here. We have a dwarf Hinoki cypress that's over by the pond, which is a very beautiful cypress that grows in a small form.
Keeping the layout weed-free is a full-time job, but it's the other maintenance, considerations that make an outdoor train layout interesting.
When we have rainy season, some of our ballast, and just like a real railroad, the track will get a little unlevel here and there, and we'll have to come in and reballast and set the track back in place. And those are some of the normal things. Some of the funny things probably is we've had an influx of lizards this year, and lizards like to be chased out of tunnels by trains, and they'll be coming full speed. We've had opossums up in here digging in the track, and probably my most unfavorite thing is dealing with the neighborhood cats, because garden railroads and neighborhood cats just don't seem to get along too well.
A working waterfall is the focal point of the Webb Outdoor Railroad. Its beauty can be shared outside and inside from the living room.
My wife said the only way we could expand the railroad is if she got a waterfall in front of the living room window. So I said that would be no problem. What I found was modular pieces that were from an amusement park where they build artificial rock, and I purchased numerous modular type pieces. They didn't really fit to any rhyme or reason or anything. I brought them home, got about 8 or 9 guys over here, helped me lift them in place, and I started cutting, and what you see now is the finished product.
When it came, he doesn't tell you how much work it was. Talk about hazards. That thing weighed a ton.
It took 8 men to lift the pond from the truck and carry it to the backyard.
He brings this thing back into the backyard, gets them to set it all the way he wants it. Everyone leaves.
And it was too high.
And it was too high. Well, I wasn't any help. He went out there and lifted it up himself, but what did you do? You jacked it up. I'm scared to death. He's under the thing. That was the biggest hazard. I almost lost my husband to garden railroading because of the pond I wanted.
It was an exciting week.
It was. It was.
The scenery at the Little Vista Garden Railroad is well worth the extra effort the Webbs put into it. When the family entertains guests in their backyard, the railroad serves as a barometer of sorts.
It's really a focal point, in a sense, I guess you would call it, whereas people will come out and sit around and watch the railroad go around, and you can tell the different types of people we have over. The railroaders, the diehards, are out here the entire time, can't get them in the house, and you know, where else you have other people that will come out for a while and also go in the house. So I find it fun to entertain with the railroad.
I'm going to show you how to make an RTV rubber mold for resin casting. I've already made one here of a couple of doors, a baggage door and a passenger door for a depot I'm making. And we'll actually make one here for this dormer window for the same depot. There are lots of parts you can make, such as these architectural molds. You can also make resin castings if you just want to sort of empty out your scrap box and make piles of junk and that you can scatter around your layout, or many other little repetitive details for any kind of car or structure that you can't go out and purchase, as in this case. I'm going to be using these supplies that are all part of a starter kit from Micromark that has the RTV rubber, the resin, a mold release. You can get the same materials from most art supply stores or even many craft stores, so they are available from lots of sources. This just happens to be a convenient group way to get it. Let's go ahead and demold this one first and pour a casting, and then we'll talk more about making the mold and the pattern. You'll note that the walls here of the mold are just the clay. Again, this comes with the starter kit here. It's important that you have a good solid flush edge for your mold. I used to always just use styrene, but then you have to break it away somehow to get the mold out. And this way, it's easily disposable. And you can see I've pulled my mold away, and there's the doors that I built and glued to this base, and here's my mold. You can see these sort of very thin, rough edges here. That's just where a little bit of the RTV rubber has slipped under the edge where I glued down. I can clean those up with an X-Acto knife, though it's also, most of those will tear off after a casting or two anyway, so it's not really a concern. They're all up on the surface. So this looks like a pretty good mold. I have, you can see that I've picked up all my detail here, even my doorknob there, as well as the grooves in the boards. As these little flanges suggest, it picks up all the detail. So you want to make sure that your original pattern is as clean as possible, because if you've made errors there, they will be in the mold. The casting resin is a two-part process. The one part is the resin itself and the other part hardener. Depending on the product you choose, some of them have different mixing ratios, so you want to check that and be sure. Always wear a glove, at least one, when working with the materials. Not so much because they'll do you any great harm, but they're obviously very sticky, and it just saves on cleanup. I'm using a couple of small cups here because obviously there's not much content here to these, so this is a pretty small mold. I've marked my cups A and B, and I've marked a fill line here down fairly low because I just don't need very much for this small casting. I'm going to set this out of the way. Double check my instructions to make sure. Pour part A into one cup, part B into another cup, and pour both into a third cup and mix thoroughly. Mixing thoroughly is a central part of all of these resins. These bottles also came with squeeze bottle tops if you want them, though they're not really necessary. So this is part A, which I'm pouring into the cup, up to my fill line. You'll note that I put a working surface over my table. I don't want to spill any of this on here if I don't have to, or so I can clean it up if I do. And part B. It's important to be reasonably accurate, though you don't have to go nuts over it. I'll pour them together into this cup. As long as I have the cups marked, I can reuse these cups numerous times because until they're mixed, there's no problem. You want to mix it till it's thoroughly mixed. That's a little easier when we get to the RTV, which has two different colors. This one will normally start to turn a little bit milky once it's thoroughly mixed. I'm actually going to set this aside for just a second and spray my mold with mold release. That helps release. RTV often releases from the resin without much help at all, but it's still good to make sure that it's coated. You don't want to pool any liquid in there. Just give it a light coating. I'm going to set this down. I'm actually going to pour from a fairly high height, and the reason for that is it helps to drive out air bubbles. because they don't survive in the thin stream. My table here isn't quite level, it looks like, so I'm going to bleed over the edge here a little. That's not ideal. And obviously is more sensitive the thinner the casting you have. I've pooled up on both, so I'm well covered. I'm going to take one of my sticks here and scrape over the mold and dump off that plastic on that side so that I get a consistent thickness. It's not terribly critical on these doors because they're going to, the back side here will be on the inside of the building. No one will see them. So the fact that there's a little bit of a extra material really doesn't matter. That was going to take about 40 minutes to set up. We'll set it aside for now and make the mold for the dormer window. Whenever you're making a part for use as a pattern, you want to be very careful that you fill all the crevices. You remember those little fine bits that were around the edges of my door mold. On this one, I've been trying to be very careful to fill all along the edges and make sure that I don't have any crevices where anything's going to get underneath. I've also been very careful that I glued down, put glue behind each of the mullions so that they're all attached firmly because I don't want them to seal up, especially when I pull my mold. I also, when I was making this mold, because this is scribed styrene and I overlaid it with that to fill in these crevices so that I didn't get mold rubber running back up inside. I'll cross my fingers and hope we did. If in fact a little bit of it gets in there, it's not the end of the world. When I pull the rubber mold off, it will probably just tear off and be okay, sort of like that little filigree around the other mold. Once the pattern has been glued down onto the surface and the edges sealed, then we need to build a wall around it that will retain the RTV rubber. And again, we want to make sure that that seals tightly against here or the RTV will run out onto our table. I'm going to use some of this clay that I pulled off the other mold for at least a couple of the walls. And again, as I mentioned before, I used to use and just build a styrene box, and while that works, you have to be very careful that you've got your edges sealed. And then when it comes time to pull the mold, you often end up having to break it out and away anyway. With any mold pattern, there's always the danger, or just the reality, that the pattern itself can be damaged in the process of pulling it from the mold. That's just a reality of mold making. Sometimes parts break off as you pull them from the mold. But it's another reason why you want to be careful and make sure that you've done as good a job as possible that you get a good mold the very first time. Again, I've just sliced off some more here to make the next wall. I obviously want to make sure that my wall is higher than my mold. You don't have to have it a lot taller, but you want to have at least 1/8 of an inch of rubber over the top of the surface, maybe a little bit more than that. I'm actually going to scoot this edge in just a little, there's no point wasting rubber. Your mold, you want to have enough around the edge of your object that you don't tear the mold as you pull parts in and out, but there's no need to have an excessive amount of rubber around the area. Judging how much you're going to get from a pour is more a matter of practice than anything else, though. If you're really unsure, you could pour water into your mold first, decant it off, and measure out how much it takes to fill your mold. But you want to make sure if you do that, that then you give your mold plenty of time to dry. While you don't want to waste the stuff, on the other hand, it seems to me it's easier to trust your mold and then mix it. You do want to coat it with rubber-to-rubber mold release, and we'll just brush that on. And again, you want to cover all surfaces, but you don't want it to pool up. I have a very thin crevice at the top here that I'm a little concerned about when we make the pattern. I may end up tearing it, in which case I'll just end up with a solid piece up there. Wouldn't be the end of the world again if that happened, but it is something where I'm making sure that I get mold release in there so that it can pull free if all goes well. I don't really need it on the clay. I'll make sure I'm across all the rest of it. Again, this is a one-to-one mixing, which makes it quite easy to use. Make sure that I have enough. I'm going to put 100 milliliters in each one. Again, as long as I haven't mixed them together, I can keep reusing these cups. And again, we pour them into a third cup. Main reason for wanting to make sure you get it all out is just simply that you keep your ratios intact, as well as not wasting any of it. And I'll use a new spatula to stir it. Because it's a two-part color, it's easier to see when I have it thoroughly mixed. I want to make sure that I don't have any stripes, striations through it. The instructions say you have about 10 minutes to mix and pour. It certainly doesn't take 10 minutes to mix it, but that gives you some working time there. I want to make sure you scrape around the edges and work all the way to the bottom so that you're thoroughly mixed. That's make sure that you don't end up with some liquid pockets in it. It doesn't set unless it's mixed. That looks pretty good. I'm going to pour, again, from a height into one corner and let it slowly fill around the whole mold. And again, that's to make sure that I have as little air as possible. When I'm mixing, I also want to try to not induce air more than I have to. And again, the long, thin stream helps to drive out air bubbles. If you're doing this professionally, professional mold makers will slap a bell jar over the top of this and attach a vacuum hose, and you can actually buy little kits like that. You could even make a low pressure one that'll help raise up air bubbles. When you put a vacuum over it, basically it just means the bubble gets bigger so it rises to the surface faster. But it's rare that you end up with much of an issue, especially with open molds like this. I'm going to stop there as I'm about getting up to the top of the mold. And that worked out pretty well in terms of the amount of rubber I mixed, so that was a good guess. The RTV rubber will take about 4 hours to fully cure. It actually gets hard to the touch in maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, but you don't want to try to pull it from the mold yet. Go ahead and just leave it in this cup. It'll set, and I can just pull it right out of this cup and it'll come out as clean as can be, so you can reuse this cup as well. You can also, to help drive out air bubbles, simply tap the surface of your table, and that'll help loosen any bubbles that are inside and get them to rise up. Particularly with the thin casting resin, that can be a useful project, though I rarely find that there's much of a problem. If, despite wrapping my knuckles on the table to drive out the air bubbles, I still ended up with an air bubble on the surface of my pattern, when I pull it, that would result in a cavity in the mold itself. It's possible to mix up a little bit more rubber, dab that into the hole, and carefully scrape the top surface clean and let it set up. And in many cases, that will repair it. You're probably still going to end up with a fine line around where the hole is. So if it's in any area that's particularly critical, if that air bubble went over a scribing in a board or just in a noticeable place, it's probably better off to go ahead and just bite the bullet and go ahead and pour another mold. On the other hand, if your pattern was destroyed in the process of making the mold and you desperately want to save it, it's certainly possible to try to go back in and add a little more rubber and save the mold, and it will adhere to the other rubber and stay there. And that's really all there is to it. As soon as the other mold sets up, we'll pull those parts and you can see how well we did. Okay, I've brought back over the mold we poured just a little bit earlier. As I noted when I poured it here, I wasn't quite level, so I don't have a real smooth casting on the back, but I think it'll be good enough, again, because we only really need the front surface. It won't matter terribly, and I will be making other castings. So let's pull it out and see how we did. I just want to pull it away carefully. And there's my baggage door. Work away, pull out. And there are my doors. So we got some pretty nice clean castings. Pretty easy. Clean up along the edges. Because I wasn't perfectly level, I've got this film back here, but that's easily enough, like any other flash, trimmed out with a sharp knife. It looks real good. We don't seem to have any air bubbles. Even my doorknob has come out cleanly. So I think this is an A1 casting and should work just fine.
Welcome to Durango, Colorado. It's sort of an out-of-the-way spot in the southwestern part of the state, but it is one of the most rugged and picturesque regions of the Rocky Mountains. It is also home to the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad, one of the engineering marvels of railroad history. Take one look at this train and this breathtaking scenery, and you can see why this has been declared a National Historic Landmark. It is a living and breathing reminder of one of the most colorful chapters in our history. In service now for more than 115 years, this is one good example of why history need not be banished to museums. Beginning with Colorado's first gold strike in the 1800s, the Rockies became the destination of choice for tens of thousands of prospectors from all around the country. The towns of Durango and Silverton grew up just 5 miles from one another, and the railroad hooked them together. This railroad carried the dreamers, the saints, and the sinners. The depots are just as you would have found them in the 1880s, and the memories are so real you can touch them.
Presently, the purpose of the Durango-Silverton is to carry passengers into what we call a journey into history, to have people know that this railroad is still running after 115 years of continuous service, taken to Silverton, which is an original mining community and our northern terminus. And as a matter of fact, we travel almost exactly the same way that you would have ridden the train back in 1881, 82. Well, this was part of the American West. Railroads, as you know, built the American West. This railroad started out of Denver in 1871 and arrived in Durango in 1881. Its purpose at that particular time was to carry miners into Silverton and to carry the ore concentrates into Durango, which previously had been done by mule team.
More than 200,000 people a year find their way here to take a 9-hour and 90-mile round-trip excursion ride between the two towns. You roll through the remote wilderness of the 2 million acre San Juan National Forest.
The first 16 miles is through the Animas Valley, which parallels the highway. And then you start climbing up the Hermosa Hill, which is at some points 2.5% grade. From there on, we get into Rockwood. Just prior to getting into Rockwood, you'll see Shalona Lake, which is a very beautiful spot. and it's a small gorge that you see in there. Rockwood, you arrive at Rockwood. At one time it was the marshalling point for the construction of the Silverton branch. Matter of fact, the Silverton branch was built from Rockwood to Silverton in 9 months, which at that particular time was considered to have been a civil engineering feat in itself. Throughout, just shortly out of Rockwood, you get into the Animas Canyon, which is the last point that there's any vehicular opportunity to go in there. From there on, it's either walking or horseback or strictly by the train. And you get into what we call the High Line, and that's the gorge where it drops approximately 400 to 500 feet down into the Animas River. Animas River, as you know, was called the River of Lost Souls, or in Spanish, the explorers at that time named it El Río de las Ánimas Perdidas, meaning the River of Lost Souls.
In a brief 1-hour walking tour of the yards, you can pack in a lot of history. See what goes on behind the scenes of a working yard. Take a look at the locomotive service areas, the restoration shops, and the turntable. This newly constructed 15-stall roundhouse is where the steam locomotives are repaired and restored. A fire back in 1989 destroyed the original roundhouse, but determination preserved its integrity and the 6 locomotives that were inside.
We have a total of 10 locomotives and 6 are operable. We have 3 K-28s and 3 K-36s. 282s. The 282, of course, means that's a wheel replacement on the locomotives. That means that there's 2 wheels on the front and 4 driver wheels, and 2 in the cab. Built by American Locomotives and Baldwin Locomotive Works back in 1923 and 1925.
Now take a look at some of the private cars available for hire. There's the Nomad, filled with elegant splendor, used for more than 100 years on trains which carried presidents and illustrious big names. It's one of the oldest narrow-gauge private cars in existence. The Alamosa parlor car, first-class bar service, and first-class memories, which are also more than a century old. The rail camp car, a sort of wilderness recreation vehicle. You rent it for a week, they leave you and your guests about halfway between Durango and Silverton, and then come and pick you up again when your fantasy is over. But if you don't have the big bucks to rent the charter cars, not to worry. Just take the train ride. This kind of picture is something money can't buy. But in Durango, Colorado, you can borrow it for a lifetime.
The museum was formed in the late 70s and early 80s by 2 model railroad clubs, the San Diego Model Railroad Club and the La Mesa Model Railroad Club. And they essentially petitioned the city for space in this particular building. And after several rounds, they essentially provided us this space, and we entered into a long-term operating agreement with the city. And over the years, we have gradually developed it to the point where you see it today. When you first enter the museum area, you will notice an operating semaphore. This is a semaphore that was taken from alongside an operating railroad. And it cycles itself, just goes up and down, changes its lights every 5 minutes, just as an attraction. And we enter a small foyer, and the entrance to the museum, as you can see, looks like the gates as they appeared leading to the train sheds of the large stations in Chicago and St. Louis, etc. In 1935, Minton Cronkite was commissioned by the Santa Fe Railroad to build a large scale model layout for the California Pacific Exposition. And this layout is generally considered to be the first true scale model railroad. He then returned to San Diego in the 40s and retired here, and was instrumental in forming one of the original clubs that did have space
and they lay out here in Balboa Park. And that club eventually was one of the two that joined together to form the Model Railroad Museum that we're sitting in now. We have 4 layouts in 3 different scales. We start with the O scale, which is the largest scale. I think that is about 2,300 square feet. Many of the members of the club that have built that particular layout were members of the original San Diego Model Railroad Club. Next, we have 2 very large HO scale layouts. One, again, is being built by the members of the San Diego Model Railroad Club. It's an accurate representation of the San Diego and Arizona Eastern Railroad. The next large layout was built by the La Mesa Model Railroad Club, and it's called the Tehachapi Pass exhibit. This is being built to very, very close faithfulness to the prototype. And one of their goals is to be able to stand beside any part of the layout and view it and see just about what you would see if you were standing alongside the corresponding spot on the real railroad. The next major layout that we have is an N-scale layout called the Pacific Desert Lines. It represents a railroad that might have been. That layout also features a very large railroad yard that is under construction, and it is being actually very closely represented, or very closely represents a yard that was planned, and we found the plans that were dated 1907 for a very large railroad yard in San Diego. Within each of the layouts themselves, there is some camouflaged work areas where equipment is stored, and where we have small workbenches, and where the rolling stock itself that runs on that layout can be repaired. And very often during operations, in one of the layouts, they actually have a dispatcher's office. In some areas, we even have a closed-circuit TV, again, so that the operators can see areas of the layout that they can't see directly from their operating station. In one of the layouts, in fact, the N-scale layout, we are installing a computer control system that will actually run several trains on the same track, and will make them meet and pass each other. And this is primarily so that we can put on a good display for the public without having an individual there to actually run the trains. We are continually completing the layouts. Overall, I would say that you only see about 50% of what will be here several years from that. We do have tentative plans to take over an area of the building that is adjacent to this, that right now is a lawnmower maintenance shop. However, we're just now beginning to deal with the city in obtaining that area. We hope to expand into that area for a toy train exhibit, and perhaps get some of the major collections of toy trains done and put them on exhibit here in the museum also.
People think of concrete as a recent building material, but the use of poured concrete actually goes back as early as 1840. By the 1890s, poured concrete was in common use by railroads for retaining walls and bridge abutments. So almost any model railroad can benefit from use of these materials. A simple way to build a concrete item is to use a styrene. Here, for example, we have a piece of primed styrene, again primed with inexpensive discount store primers, which we will use and we will make to look like a concrete wall. The first step to make this look like concrete is to add a texture. We will take gesso, which is an art supply. It's actually ground up marble with acrylic medium, and by taking a stiff brush, we will stipple a coat on. There's no need to be neat. We want to kind of do it kind of messily, so we will get a texture. If little areas show through and do not get colored, that is fine too. So now we need coloring. Concrete color varies by many things. It varies by the light it's in, it varies by the season, it varies by the direction it is facing, it varies by the quarry where the sand and stone was come from. So almost any color you think that resembles concrete will be just fine. In this case, I have a tan color I like, and I will again stipple a coat with a stiff brush onto the prime surface. It's not important to be real neat. We can do the entire wall in a matter of a few minutes. We have a finished wall, and if I've missed a few spots and there are a few bumps, that will only add to the character. We're not trying to make a brand new wall that has been just finished last year. We're talking about a wall that was built when the railroad rebuilt itself in about the 1920s. The next step, to add some discoloring, I have used a wash, which is really just a thin application of paint of a yellow ochre, and while it was wet, I streaked some rust color onto it to add rusting that comes out from imperfections in the materials. As a final step, I have weathered the wall with some watercolor washes, blacks and browns and grays, until it looks pretty old. In this case, I have added some little weep holes with streaking, and I have added some form lines and cracks with a pencil and a ruler. As you can see, it is quite easy to turn a piece of styrene into an old concrete wall. Stone and concrete are both masonry, except stone has a much greater variety of color, but we can use similar methods to weather them both. For example, here is an injection molded piece of a stone wall. Looks like a shiny piece of plastic. As usual, I find it easier to spray paint the sides and prime them so I have a good base color. Since masonry is masonry, a coat of gesso gives it a texture. Try to be careful not to get too much gesso into the mortar lines. That can be scraped out while wet very easily. In this case, I've taken several warm grays and I've just stipple coated a variety of color to simulate stone. It looks kind of messy now and uneven. I've also painted the doors and windows and used the brownstone for the trim. Another great thing you can do is to highlight dark colors with the thin wash of white watercolor. Now that this wash is dry, I can begin to weather everything at the same time. I will take some watercolor paint and I will make a thin glaze of watercolor and just start to apply it over everything. It looks kind of messy now. Watercolor, just by spreading it, tends to spread and form into the cracks more so than it does on the surface. So we're starting to just fill in the cracks. This tends to be a very imprecise method. You just slobber it on, and since it washes off, you don't worry too much about what happens. Okay, we've applied a brown wash to this piece. Here we have one that the brown wash is complete. I usually use a thin black overcoat just to add a highlight at the end. Again, there's no need to be neat, and considering using other colors. I've seen red mortar, green mortar, mortar of almost any color you could imagine. Little black just kind of seems to bring out a little more depth. If it looks kind of messy now, it's not to worry. I often apply it more heavily than I should, because the final step is to take a damp towel and just pick up the paint off the surface. This makes the highlights on the stone look a little brighter and makes the darks look a little darker, and we've transformed this piece of styrene into a realistic looking stone wall.
In busy Orlando, Florida, there are lots of places to go shopping. Behind this storefront, you may find a mesa, a farm, and track galore.
Hi, welcome aboard.
started meeting in a two-car garage and building our modules there as part of his railroad. We grew out of that fairly quick, and we moved into a small shopping center that we got for free, no rent charge, just to be there. And we grew out of that, and we ended up here. As you can see, we got a much larger facility, and we now have somewhere in the area of 30, 35 modules, which gives us somewhere about 325 linear feet of track all the way around, which means that we can run 100-car freight trains.
This group is made up of all kinds of folks, from CPAs to retirees. Each creation tells a story.
Well, I built this module basically to represent a generic southwestern scene. It includes mesas and cacti and an Indian shepherd on the hill. We also have a dinosaur excavation over here where the dinosaur was discovered while the main line track was being excavated. And there's an old narrow gauge line that is still evident alongside the main line, and other types of things that you would typically see in the desert Southwest.
In front of us here we have Bill Yoder's who likes to do logging. So we've got about 8 or 16 feet of modular layout here that's got logging on it with a little back line serving the logging industry. Here we've just got a rural scene with a river running through it.
There's a lot of cooperation in this club. Some of the projects are done in tandem.
Tom wanted to build his first module as part of the club, and he wanted to have something where the tracks were above the standard land area. And so he designed it to be a low in the center module.
And one of the things that we wanted to do all along is try to tie module scenes a little bit more together. So Ed and I collaborated. This is his module, and he was already way ahead of me when I started about 4 months ago.
And we decided that we needed a few houses to sort of complement the city scene, the town scene, and that's how we came up with the idea of this area here where we have a small suburban street.
Yeah, and in a joint venture type of style, we have shaped the landscape, put the plaster and all this together, and every now and then Ed got a little bit ahead with the scenery, and I had to follow through with getting the houses ready to put all this together. Different about this, about most other, is that we worked with foam, which is a lot easier, so you can just go in, slice a corner off if it doesn't look right, or fit a road in differently. So it was an interesting approach for both of us, for the first time working with different materials and working together.
The advantages are, first of all, if you don't have room in your house to build a layout, you can build a small module at home and bring it with the other club members and assemble a finished railroad. If we had to move this club tomorrow, we would set up someplace else and we have a different arrangement. The flexibility of the modules allows us to do that so that we can go anywhere in the country with people that have the same modules and rebuild our layout.
Not only is this storefront a display area, but it's also a place for working.
I'm going to do away with the Secretary's report and the Treasury report.
A place for meeting, and a library too.
I find it relaxing. It's after a week of work, it's just a great place to come, good comradeship, and I just like detailing the model and running trains. So that's the enjoyment I get out of it. And making an operating power plant is kind of an interesting goal.
I like to come to the club because it gives me an opportunity to do something with my hands. It gives me a time to get away from my work, gives me a time to be with friends who share a common interest and take my mind off of other things.
I think there are probably 3 or 4 different basic types in the club. There are modelers, there are collectors, there are builders, and I'm a runner. I enjoy watching the trains run.
Whether it's building, running, collecting, or modeling, the members of the Orlando Society of Model Railroaders do it for the fun.
Adding loads are one of the easiest ways to improve the appearance of your freight car fleet. And there are a number of different options for just about any type of freight car. Now, one of the most common are loads for gondola cars. Now, these cars are open, so there's a lot of opportunity to add detail, and it's just a matter of dropping in a load. This Athearn gondola had a molded-in plastic load that came with it. Or, if you'd like more variety, companies like Chooch Industries they actually offer cast plaster loads that you can add yourself. These include these tire loads here, or I have these two artillery pieces. But instead of adding these artillery pieces to a gondola, I'm actually going to add them to a flat car. And one of the things I like to do with loads is there are times when I don't want the load to be a permanent part of the car, but I still, if I just set this on here, there's a chance it might slide around or fall off during operations. So one of the tricks I like to do is just take a little piece of modeling clay and roll it into a little pea-sized ball, attach it to the bottom, and just stick it right on the car. And that'll hold it in place while it's going down the track, yet if I want to change loads, it's just a matter of lifting it off, and there's no glue marks or anything like that that I have to worry about on the top of my freight car. Now, AccuRail actually offers a unique product for their coal hoppers. Sometimes coal loads and gondola loads, they can be hard to get out of a car. You might have to use a screwdriver or a nail, and you might damage the surface of the paint. AccuRail actually offers a product that helps solve this. And to unload an AccuRail hopper, you just use a magnet. And there are actually two ball bearings underneath here that allow you to use a magnet to lift them out. Loads don't have to be limited to open cars like hoppers, gondolas, or flat cars. Box cars also can benefit from having a load, and one of the most unique loads that you can add is a grain load. Prior to the 1950s, most grain in this country was hauled in box cars, not in covered hoppers, as is common today. And one of the distinctive features of this type of car is this, a temporary grain door. And these were actually boards that would be put in place, and with about a third of the space left at the top for the grain to actually be loaded into the car. And then once the car reached its destination, it would park over an unloading grate, and workers would come out and they would tear out the doors and unload the grain by hand. And there's a couple of steps to easily make your own grain load. One of the things you want to make sure is that you choose a car that actually has opening doors, so you'll be able to see your work. And then there are companies that actually make these ready-made grain doors, and all they are really just a sheet of paper with the correct printing on it, because there were actually companies that made specific temporary doors, like this company here is actually signaled grain doors, and that was probably one of the most common. And the first thing you want to do is just trim off a couple of these doors. And you'll notice I'm not using scissors, I'm using a hobby knife, because this way I get a nice straight edge when I cut through paper. Also, if you are going to use a hobby knife, and I suggest you do, use a fresh blade, especially when cutting something like paper. It'll make sure you get a nice clean edge. After you've cut the grain doors to fit, then all you need to do is attach them to the inside of the boxcar shell using a piece of tape. Make sure that the bottom's flush with the door. The grain door is in place. Now I'll go ahead and I'll do the same thing for the other side. Now, once you have your doors installed, you need to go ahead and add a grain load. Now, there are some manufacturers out there that make ready-made grain loads for boxcars, but they can be hard to find. So I've actually found a way to make my own using a scrap piece of foam and just some fine turf for my grain. And the first step, I've gone and cut my piece of scrap foam to fit the size of the body of the base of the frame of the boxcar here. And then to actually add the grain, go ahead and take some white glue. Spread it over the top. And just add my grain. Now once the glue sets, I'll have my grain load, and I'll go back and I'll fill in if there's any light spots. Now after I've added my grain load, one of the things you can do is you can add diluted matte medium or even diluted white glue over the top of this to help it set even better. Here's one that I've finished earlier. I'm going to go ahead and add this one into the inside of my boxcar. You want to make sure and position the load so that the grain is visible just above the top of the door. Once you're satisfied with the position of your load, go ahead and wipe off any excess glue that might have gotten onto the body shell. Then, once the load is dry, go ahead and attach the body shell to the boxcar frame, and you have a new grain boxcar ready for your layout. There's a wide variety of other loads and vehicles available for freight cars. There's construction equipment, there are pipe loads, there are even military loads. And if you want to even go into more detail, you can take inspiration from the real world. You can add chains and wheel chocks as seen on this construction equipment here. You can add supports to your pipe load. You can add chains and tie-downs behind the military vehicles as well. So really, just use your imagination, and adding loads are a great way to add realism to your freight car fleet.
In New York City, in order to stand out, you've got to be big and impressive. The Hellgate Bridge fits the bill. It carries train traffic over the Hellgate section of the East River, known for its strong current. Before the bridge, if you wanted to get from one side to the other, you faced either an incredibly long roundabout land trip or the cumbersome option of floating your train cars across the water on barges.
The important aspect of this bridge is that it permitted traffic from the south and the southwest to access New England. And prior to the building of the bridge, most traffic was car floated across the harbor, which is expensive and weather dependent. This was the first link between, let's say, Washington and Boston. And it was built just after the building of Penn Station and the tunnels under the Hudson River and the East River, and cut the travel time between Washington and Boston by a good 4 hours.
When it opened in 1917, it was the largest steel arch bridge in the world, 12 stories above the water, spanning nearly 1,000 feet between twin towers. Its sheer size and graceful arch made it an engineering landmark. Designed by Gustav Lindenthal, it cemented his reputation as one of the world's premier bridge builders.
It was designed for extremely heavy loads. It only has 2 tracks on it now, but it was originally designed for 4 railroad tracks and for the later addition of a second deck with a roadway and a streetcar line, which was never built. So it's a very, very heavy, enormous bridge. So from an engineering point of view, it's really quite a marvelous piece of work. Some of the pieces of the bridge weighed as much as 250 tons. And the parts that had to be erected in the arch, some of those I think were as much as 180 tons. It had to be, usually they were lifted off of barges in the river and put in place in the bridge.
In the mid-1970s, when rail service in this region of the country was suffering, Amtrak inherited the bridge. In the 1990s, the dingy dark brown rust color was covered with a vibrant deep red. The granite-faced towers were scrubbed, and the bridge once again started to look like a respectable landmark. Joe Greenstein is a railroad writer and photographer, as well as a New York native, who thinks the Hellgate is as impressive as any New York runway fashion model.
I think that the scope of the bridge is just startling. It's just such a beautiful structure, especially since it's been painted. The red has really brought the bridge alive. One aspect is the view that it gives of the city. Most of the rail approaches into the city just don't give you a sense of what New York is like. The New York Central into Grand Central Station goes through some pretty depressed areas, factories and junkyards and tenements. And the Pennsylvania goes into a tunnel and you hardly get a glimpse of the city at all. But from up on the Hellgate, you get a magnificent view of the skyline. And it really is a gateway. It really gives you a sense of Gotham, of the metropolis that you're approaching. It is most impressive.
Though some freight is carried over the Hellgate, most of the traffic is made up of Amtrak passenger trains. Some use the electrified catenary, which is still in place. Whether looking at the Hellgate from a beautiful park or from the rooftop of a New York residence, it's easy to see why rail fans consider this a masterpiece. It offers visitors a majestic view as their trains come rolling into the Big Apple. And with the growing push for more high-speed rail service here, the glory days of the Hellgate may be yet to come.
We've reached the end of the line for this edition. We hope you've enjoyed the ride. We'll have more layouts, prototypes, and how-to tips next time, and more fun with the world's greatest hobby in the Dream, Plan, Build video series. Welcome to the Dream, Plan, Build video series. In this collection, you'll see amazing layouts of fellow modelers, some of the most interesting trains and railroads around, and plenty of tips and techniques to make your time at the workbench and at the throttle more productive and a lot more fun. We'll travel across America in search of layouts we all dream of operating and get inside the heads of their builders as they describe how they designed and built their prized railroads. Plus, whether you're running a 4x8 or a 40x80 operation, you'll discover tips and techniques to make your rolling stock run smoother and look more realistic.